Keanu Reeves had never been one for attention. In fact, he preferred the quiet, the simple moments far from the flashing cameras and the incessant buzz of his celebrity life. But tonight was different. It was a rare evening out with his mother, Patricia, a woman whose quiet grace and strength had shaped Keanu's own calm demeanor. They had decided to dine at one of Los Angeles' most prestigious restaurants, a sleek, modern place where the decor was as sophisticated as the clientele. The ambient lighting gave the place an air of warmth, and soft jazz played in the background, creating the kind of atmosphere that invited long conversations and fine wine. Keanu was used to these kinds of settings. He'd been to enough fancy restaurants in his time. But tonight, there was something about it that felt more personal. It wasn't the food or the elegant surroundings. It was simply the company. He had taken Patricia out for a rare night on the town to celebrate her birthday, and as they sat down at their table, a sense of peace settled over him. But peace would not last. As Keanu and his mother settled in, a young waiter approached their table. He looked to be in his early 20s, slightly disheveled with an air of disinterest. His name tag read Jake. He didn't greet them with the usual pleasantries that one might expect in such an establishment, nor did he smile. Instead, his eyes briefly scanned Keanu before moving to Patricia, lingering a second too long before he muttered, "What can I get for you tonight?" Keanu didn't think much of it. It was a strange interaction, sure, but he shrugged it off. After all, the waiter was probably just having a bad day. But then came the moment that changed everything. Patricia, smiling warmly, asked, "Could you recommend something for me, dear? Something light, but filling?" Jake's response was dismissive, his voice flat as he scanned the menu, his gaze drifting toward Patricia with a hint of condescension. "Well, I don't know what you would like, but I guess you could go with the soup if you don't mind something soft." The words were barely audible, but they cut through the calm like a sudden gust of wind. Keanu felt a flicker of discomfort, but it wasn't until he saw the hurt in his mother's eyes that he realized how deeply the comment had affected her. Patricia, ever so gracious, smiled politely, but it was clear that the remark had struck a chord. Keanu's jaw tightened, a feeling of protectiveness rising inside him. He wasn't used to confrontation, but this felt different. It wasn't just a casual insult. It was disrespect, plain and simple. Before he could say anything, Jake was already walking away, not bothering to wait for their response. The air between Keanu and Patricia shifted, a subtle but undeniable tension that neither of them could ignore. Keanu took a deep breath. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, his voice low, the weight of the moment sinking in. She smiled faintly, trying to brush it off. "It's nothing, sweetheart, I'm fine." But Keanu could see the slight tremor in her hand as she picked up the wine glass, her eyes losing a little of their usual warmth. The words of the young waiter had already taken root, leaving her with an unexpected sting. Keanu could feel his frustration bubbling beneath the surface. He was used to being calm, even when faced with rudeness. But there was something about seeing his mother, of all people, hurt by such a careless remark that pushed him to the edge. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward even when things get tough? The tension between Keanu and the waiter lingered in the air like an uninvited guest. Keanu tried to brush it off. After all, it was just one rude comment, right? But something about the way Jake had treated his mother wouldn't leave his mind. His mother, the woman who had raised him with so much love and grace, didn't deserve this. And yet there she was, quietly suffering under the weight of a stranger's careless words. Keanu watched her carefully. She had tried to mask the hurt with a smile, but her eyes were no longer sparkling with the same warmth they usually had. Her usual radiance was clouded by the lingering sting of Jake's remark. "So, Mom, what do you think of the soup?" Keanu asked, trying to keep the conversation light even though his mind was a million miles away. She looked at him, her smile returning, but it wasn't as bright as before. "It sounds lovely," she said, though there was a slight quiver in her voice. "I'm just happy to be here with you." Keanu felt a pang in his chest. She was trying to act like everything was fine, but he could tell it wasn't. He knew her well enough to see that her mind was elsewhere, probably replaying the moment over and over in her head, wondering if she had somehow caused the waiter to treat her that way. As the waiter returned to take their order, Keanu steeled himself. He was determined to not let the situation escalate further, but his patience was wearing thin. He couldn't let Jake get away with treating his mother like this, not without saying something. Jake came to their table with the same aloof attitude. His eyes flicked to Keanu, then to Patricia, then back to Keanu. It was clear that he still had no idea who he was dealing with. But that wasn't what bothered Keanu. It was the way Jake treated his mother. There was no respect, no decency. It was as if Patricia was invisible to him. Keanu cleared his throat. "We'll have the soup," he said, his voice measured, but with a hint of steel. "And we'd like some bread with that, please. Could you bring it right away?" Jake nodded, but his expression was still indifferent, bordering on dismissive. "Sure. Whatever," he muttered, before turning to walk away. But before Jake could leave, Keanu caught his arm, his grip firm but not threatening. The waiter stopped, clearly annoyed by the interruption, but Keanu wasn't backing down this time. "I don't know if you realize it," Keanu began, his voice steady, "but your tone and your words, what you said to my mother, were completely disrespectful. You don't have to be a fan, but you do have to treat people with decency." Jake stiffened, his face turning slightly red as the weight of Keanu's words hit him. I didn't mean anything by it," he muttered quickly, clearly caught off guard by Keanu's calm yet firm reprimand. "It doesn't matter if you meant it or not," Keanu responded. "The fact is, you said it, and it hurt her. You owe her an apology." There was a moment of silence, thick and heavy. Jake glanced down, avoiding eye contact. For a brief second, Keanu saw the flicker of something in his eyes. Shame, embarrassment. It was hard to tell. "I'm sorry," Jake muttered, his voice small and apologetic. "I didn't mean to upset anyone. I've just been stressed. You know?" Keanu felt a strange shift in the air. The anger that had simmered in him was slowly beginning to dissipate, replaced by something more akin to understanding. He could see that Jake wasn't a bad person. He was just someone who had made a mistake. But it still didn't change the fact that his mother had been hurt. Keanu nodded, his expression softening. "I understand," he said, his voice gentler. "Now. But just remember, how we treat others matters. A simple apology can go a long way." Jake nodded again, this time with more sincerity. "Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry," he said once more before retreating to the kitchen, leaving Keanu and his mother alone at the table. Keanu glanced at his mother, who was now looking at him with a mixture of gratitude and awe. She gave him a small smile, the corners of her eyes softening. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said quietly, "but you didn't have to do that. I'm fine." Keanu shrugged, trying to downplay the situation. "You deserve better than that," he said simply. "You always have." But deep down, Keanu knew that the incident wasn't over. There was still an unresolved tension between him and Jake, a quiet undercurrent of discomfort that neither of them had fully dealt with. He had addressed it, yes, but Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that something more needed to be done. There was more to this than just a rude waiter. There was something deeper, a sense of humanity that had been lost somewhere in the shuffle of daily life. He wasn't sure how it would all play out, but one thing was certain. This wasn't the end. It was only just beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The rest of the meal was quiet, almost unnervingly so. Keanu and his mother ate in silence, occasionally exchanging glances, but neither of them spoke much. The weight of what had happened earlier still hung in the air, a presence neither of them could shake. Keanu glanced at his mother from time to time, watching her pick at her food. He could tell that, while she was trying to seem unaffected, she was still holding on to the sting of the waiter's words. He hated that. Hated that someone could so carelessly hurt her, especially someone who didn't even know her. The moment was thick with unspoken words, and Keanu knew that for his mother's sake he needed to do something about it. The apology had been offered, sure, but it felt rushed, too easy. Jake had been quick to say sorry, but Keanu could tell that the apology was more out of obligation than genuine remorse. There had been no real understanding, no real acknowledgement of the damage that had been done. As the waiter returned to clear their plates, Keanu's patience was running thin. He couldn't leave things as they were, not without some resolution. His mother deserved more than an offhand apology and a quick retreat. Jake approached the table once again, his eyes briefly flicking to Keanu before landing on his mother. He still wore the same slightly aloof expression, though his posture had softened slightly since their earlier exchange. Keanu could see that the young man was clearly on edge, unsure of how to handle the situation. It wasn't lost on Keanu that, in some ways, this was just as uncomfortable for Jake as it was for them. Keanu cleared his throat. "Jake," he said, his voice calm but firm. The waiter froze for a moment, his eyes widening in surprise. "I think we need to talk." Jake swallowed, clearly unsettled. About what exactly?" he asked, his voice betraying a hint of nervousness. Keanu leaned forward, his gaze steady. "I don't think you fully understood how your words affected my mother. An apology is just a start. You can't just brush it off as if it didn't matter." Jake shifted uncomfortably. I'm sorry," he said again. But this time, his voice faltered. He seemed genuinely unsure of what else to say. "Sorry isn't enough," Keanu continued. "You hurt her, and you need to realize that. You need to think about how your words can impact others. A simple comment like that. It's not just a joke, it lingers, it leaves a mark. Do you get that?" The weight of Keanu's words hung in the air. Jake shifted from foot to foot, clearly struggling to find the right words. It wasn't often that someone called him out like this, especially someone like Keanu Reeves, whose reputation preceded him. But it wasn't the fame that mattered to Keanu, it was the principle. "I get it," Jake said quietly, his voice softening. "I didn't mean to hurt her, I guess I don't know, I've been dealing with some stuff and I shouldn't have taken it out on you guys." Keanu took a breath, nodding. "We all go through tough times, but we don't have to take it out on others. You don't get to hurt people just because you're having a bad day. That's not how it works." Jake looked down, his hands fidgeting with the edge of the tablecloth. He was still processing the weight of the conversation, still figuring out how to make sense of what Keanu was saying. But there was something in his eyes now, something like shame, maybe, or maybe a flicker of understanding. Keanu wasn't expecting a miracle. He knew that just talking wouldn't fix everything, but it was a start. He could see that Jake was genuinely trying to understand, to reflect on what had happened. That was all Keanu could ask for in the moment. After a long pause, Jake finally spoke again. "I'm really sorry. I know it's not enough, but I'll try to be better." Keanu nodded, his expression softening. "That's all anyone can do. Try to be better. Just remember to think before you speak. You never know the weight your words carry." Jake nodded quickly, his apology now feeling more sincere. "I will, thanks for calling me out. I needed it." Keanu's face remained calm, but inside he felt a small sense of satisfaction. It wasn't about the apology. It was about the realization that Jake had learned something. That, at least, made the whole confrontation worthwhile. As Jake walked away, Keanu glanced at his mother. She hadn't spoken during the exchange, but Keanu could see a small smile tugging at her lips. "You did the right thing," she said softly, her voice full of warmth. "Thank you, sweetheart." Keanu smiled back at her. "It's just the way things should be, Mom. No one should let that kind of thing slide." They finished their meal in relative silence, but the mood had lightened. Keanu had done what he felt needed to be done, and Jake had at least taken the first step toward learning from his mistake. Yet, as they finished their dinner and prepared to leave, Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was far from over. There was something about this encounter, this apology, that felt incomplete. The pieces hadn't fully come together. Keanu wondered if, somehow, their paths would cross again in the future, and whether they'd both walk away from the situation having learned something even more profound. The evening ended with the quiet hum of the restaurant's ambiance surrounding Keanu and his mother as they stood to leave. Patricia gave a small, grateful smile as Keanu helped her into her coat. The moment felt like a breath of fresh air after the storm, a reprieve from the tension that had clouded the night. Despite everything, Keanu felt good about the way things had unfolded. Jake had apologized, his words had made an impact, and his mother seemed at ease again. But there was still something gnawing at him, a feeling of unfinished business. The encounter with Jake, though resolved in a sense, left Keanu with a sense of unease that he couldn't shake. He couldn't help but feel that there was something more that needed to happen, some larger lesson to be learned. But what was it? The drive home was uneventful, save for a few comments about how much they'd enjoyed the food. Keanu glanced over at Patricia several times, his mind still lingering on the events of the night. "Mom," he said after a long pause, his voice soft. "Are you okay?" Patricia smiled at him, her expression more relaxed than it had been earlier. "I'm fine, sweetheart, really. I appreciate you standing up for me. It means a lot." Keanu smiled in return, but the words felt hollow, like they weren't enough. He couldn't shake the feeling that something had been left unsaid, something deeper than the surface-level apology Jake had given. When they finally reached her apartment, Patricia stepped out of the car, giving Keanu a lingering look. "Thank you again, darling. You really didn't have to do that, but I'm glad you did." Keanu nodded, though part of him knew he wasn't done. "I'll see you tomorrow, Mom." She kissed him on the cheek before disappearing into the building, leaving Keanu standing there in the quiet of the night. It was one of those moments where the world seemed to slow down, and he couldn't help but reflect on what had transpired. The thing was, he wasn't sure if he had done the right thing. Sure, he'd defended his mother, but was that really the solution? Did confronting Jake like that truly change anything, or had he just set in motion something that would have a bigger impact later on? He didn't know. The next few days passed, in a blur of rehearsals, interviews, and the usual whirlwind of Keanu's life. But Jake was never far from his mind. He kept wondering about the young man, what had caused him to act that way, what had driven him to lash out at an innocent woman. Was it something personal? Or was it just the weight of the world, building up and spilling over in that single moment? Keanu decided he needed to know more. The curiosity tugged at him, and despite his inclination to keep his distance from unnecessary drama, he found himself reaching for his phone. He hadn't expected to get a response when he texted the restaurant manager, but to his surprise the reply came quickly. "Hey, Keanu, hope you're doing well. I remember the night you and your mom came in. Such a lovely couple. Jake was actually going through a rough patch at the time. He's been dealing with some personal issues, family troubles, you know. I think he was just stretched thin. We've had a few talks with him about his attitude. He's a good kid, just a little lost. Right now, I'll make sure he knows that he owes your mom a proper apology when he's back." Keanu stared at the message for a long moment, the weight of the words sinking in. It made sense now. Jake wasn't just a rude waiter. He was a person, struggling in his own way. The apology had been genuine, but it was clear now that there was more to the story than Keanu had realized. He could feel the shift within himself, the understanding growing. What had happened wasn't just an isolated incident. Jake's behavior was a reflection of something deeper, something that Keanu, in his calm, collected way, had missed in the heat of the moment. He could still stand up for his mother and hold Jake accountable, but that didn't mean he had to ignore the humanity behind it all. A new kind of empathy began to settle in Keanu's chest. He knew that standing up for someone was important, but it was equally important to recognize the underlying causes of someone's behavior, to understand their struggles before making a judgment. Keanu picked up his phone again, this time typing a message back to the manager. "Thanks for letting me know. I appreciate you filling in the blanks. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help Jake through this." He hit send and leaned back in his chair, reflecting on the lessons of the past few days. He had learned more than he expected, not just about Jake, but about the power of understanding and the impact of human connection. Sometimes the right thing wasn't always clear at first. Sometimes it required stepping back and considering the bigger picture. Later that evening, Keanu received another message from the manager. "I spoke with Jake and he's been working on himself. He's really grateful for your patience. I'll make sure he takes responsibility for what happened with your mom." "Thanks again, Keanu." Keanu smiled, feeling a quiet sense of peace wash over him. Things were slowly falling into place. Jake was on the path to growth, and Keanu had done more than just confront him. He had given him a chance to change. As Keanu settled into bed that night, he thought about the night at the restaurant, the anger, the confrontation, the apology, and realized that it had been a turning point for everyone involved. It wasn't just about his mother being hurt or Jake being rude. It was about how people, when given the opportunity, could find the strength to grow and learn from their mistakes. Keanu closed his eyes, feeling a rare sense of fulfillment. Maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't so complicated after all. A few weeks had passed since the incident at the restaurant. Keanu had kept an eye on the situation from a distance, not out of any need for control, but because he knew something had shifted, not just for Jake, but for himself as well. The truth was, life had a way of teaching lessons in unexpected places, and that night had been one of those pivotal moments. Keanu was finishing up another round of interviews for an upcoming film when he received a call from the restaurant manager. "Hey, Keanu, hope you're doing well. I just wanted to update you on Jake. He came in today, and let's just say he's made quite a transformation." Keanu leaned back in his chair, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "Well, he showed up early for his shift, apologized to everyone in the staff meeting, and asked if he could make things right with you and your mother. He's been working on his attitude and trying to find a better balance in his life. Oh, he's not perfect, but he's trying." Keanu felt a weight lift off his chest. He was happy to hear that Jake was making an effort to change. His earlier intervention had done something good after all. Not just for Jake, but for the people around him. "That's great to hear. I'm glad he's working through things." "Tell him I appreciate the effort," Keanu said, his voice warm. As the manager hung up, Keanu sat back and thought about how this small act of standing up for his mother had blossomed into something larger. It wasn't just about confronting the waiter. It was about breaking down walls of misunderstanding and giving people a chance to evolve. But as much as Keanu felt content with the outcome, there was still one final part of the story that lingered. In his mind, his mother. The two of them had been closer than ever, but Keanu hadn't really addressed the impact this had on her. Yes, she had smiled and thanked him for speaking up, but there was something in her eyes that told him she was still processing the incident in her own way. Keanu decided it was time to talk. One evening, after a quiet dinner at her apartment, Keanu asked, "Mom, can we talk?" She looked at him over the rim of her coffee cup, her expression soft. "Of course, sweetheart, what's on your mind?" Keanu sat across from her, his gaze steady. "About what happened at the restaurant. I've been thinking a lot about you. I just want to make sure you're okay, that it didn't hurt you more than I realized." She sighed softly, setting her cup down on the table. "You know, I'm fine, really, but that doesn't mean it didn't sting. It's just not something you expect to happen, especially not when you're with your son. But you were there, and you did what you had to do, and that's enough for me. More than enough." Keanu nodded, but a small part of him couldn't let go of the feeling that there was more beneath the surface. He wanted to dive deeper, to make sure she understood that she didn't have to carry this on her own. That her son would always be there, not just to protect her, but to truly understand what she was going through. "I think it hurt me more to see you hurt," Keanu said quietly. "I know you're strong, Mom, but I want to be there for you in every way, even when it's hard to talk about." Her eyes softened, and for the first time Keanu saw the vulnerability behind her usual calm exterior. "It's not easy for me to show weakness, but when I saw you standing up for me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. It reminded me that I didn't have to go through things alone, that we together can face anything." The words hung between them, heavy and meaningful. In that moment, Keanu realized something powerful. The true strength of family wasn't just about the actions we take. It was about being there for each other, truly understanding, and offering support without hesitation. "I'll always be here, Mom, for everything, even when it's hard." She reached out and gently touched his hand, her voice soft but full of gratitude. "I know, sweetheart, and that's why I'm proud of you. Not because you stood up to Jake, but because you've always been there for me, when it mattered most. They sat there for a while, the conversation fading into comfortable silence, but both of them understood something they hadn't fully realized before. There were no perfect solutions to life's challenges, no flawless paths. But as long as they faced things together, there was always hope for a new beginning, a new chance to grow and learn. Keanu felt a sense of calm that he hadn't expected to find after all the chaos of the past weeks. The journey he had taken of confronting Jake, of learning to see things from a different perspective, of understanding the deeper layers of human interaction, had shaped him in ways he hadn't anticipated. It had deepened his connection with his mother, with the people around him, and even with himself. That night, Keanu went to bed with a peaceful heart. He wasn't just a son protecting his mother, he was a man learning the power of empathy, of truly listening, and of understanding that people's actions were often a reflection of deeper struggles. And sometimes, the greatest gift we could give each other was the chance to heal. It had been a few weeks since the confrontation with Jake, and life seemed to have returned to its usual rhythm. Keanu continued with his filming schedule, keeping busy with his usual work commitments, while his mother settled back into her routine. The air between them was lighter, their bond stronger. Yet, as Keanu went through his day-to-day life, there was one thing he hadn't fully anticipated. The ripples of that night at the restaurant were far from over. It all started on a Saturday morning when Keanu received an unexpected call. He was preparing for an early meeting, a coffee in hand, when his phone buzzed with a number he didn't recognize. Usually he wouldn't pick up, but something about the urgency in the tone of the voicemail made him pause. He set his coffee down and listened to the message. "Hi, Mr. Reeves, this is Jake. I don't know how to explain this, but I need to talk to you. It's important, and I'm not sure who else to turn to. Please, can you call me back? It's about something that happened." Keanu's brow furrowed. The tone in Jake's voice was different from before. There was a sense of panic, maybe even desperation. Something wasn't right. Without wasting a moment, Keanu called Jake back, curiosity gnawing at him. The phone rang several times before it was answered. "Keanu?" Jake's voice sounded shaky, and Keanu immediately knew something was off. "Thanks for calling me back. I didn't know who else to turn to." "Jake, what's going on?" Keanu asked, his tone calm but concerned. There was a long pause before Jake spoke again. "I messed up big time, and I don't know how to fix it. I need your help." Keanu sat down, the weight of Jake's words pulling him into a deep sense of worry. "Tell me what happened," he said, his voice steady but full of concern. I found out something," Jake began, his voice trembling. "Something about my past, about my family, and I don't know how to deal with it. I've been trying to keep it together, but it's falling apart, and now it's affecting everyone around me. I'm really scared." Keanu leaned forward, trying to make sense of the sudden change in Jake's tone. "Jake, you're not alone in this. Whatever it is, we can figure it out together, but you need to trust me." Jake hesitated for a moment, then spoke in a rush as if the words had been building up for too long. "My father, he's in prison. I just found out. I didn't know until now. My mom, she didn't want to tell me, but now I can't. Ignore it. Everything's falling apart and I don't know how to handle it. I thought I was angry at everyone else, but now I realize I'm just angry at myself. I've been taking it out on people who didn't deserve it." Keanu sat in stunned silence for a moment. The revelation was heavy, and it explained so much about Jake's behavior. His anger, his defensiveness, the way he acted out at the restaurant, it all started to make sense. He wasn't just an arrogant waiter. He was a young man struggling with the weight of a painful, hidden truth. "I understand, Jake," Keanu said quietly, his voice full of empathy. "You've been carrying this alone, and it's been eating away at you. But you don't have to go through it by yourself anymore. You need to talk to someone, whether that's me or someone else. Don't let this consume you." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Jake spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm afraid, Keanu, I don't know how to fix it. How do I fix everything I've broken?" Keanu's heart ached for the young man. He had seen anger, frustration, and pain in many forms, but this was different. This was the kind of anguish that could destroy a person from the inside out if they weren't careful. "You start by taking responsibility for your actions, Jake," Keanu said, his voice firm but gentle. "You don't have to fix everything all at once. You start small by being honest with the people you've hurt, including yourself. And then you give yourself the grace to heal." Jake let out a shaky breath. "But what about my mom? She doesn't know I found out. I don't know how to talk to her about it." Keanu thought for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "You talk to her the same way you're talking to me now, honestly, openly, and without shame. She's your mother. She'll understand. The truth is hard, but it's the only way forward." Jake's voice trembled as he responded, "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done without you." Keanu's mind raced with everything he had just learned. Jake was no longer just the waiter from that night at the restaurant. He was a young man grappling with a painful, life-altering revelation. He had tried to hide behind anger, but now he was facing something far more terrifying: the truth. "You're welcome, Jake. Just remember, it's never too late to make things right. I'll be here no matter what." After they hung up, Keanu felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility. He wasn't just an actor anymore, a celebrity. He was part of something bigger now, a mentor, a guide for someone who needed it. He didn't know how far Jake's journey would go, or what it would ultimately mean for him, but Keanu knew that this was far from over. Later that evening, Keanu reflected on everything that had happened. He had confronted a situation head-on, stood up for his mother, and offered someone a chance to grow. Now it seemed that his role in Jake's life was about to evolve into something deeper. He was no longer just helping someone fix a mistake. He was guiding them through one of the most painful moments of their life. Keanu's phone buzzed with a message. It was from his mother. "I just wanted to thank you again for everything. You've shown me the power of compassion, and I'm so proud of you. I don't say it enough, but I hope you know how much I love you." Keanu smiled to himself, feeling the weight of her words. This journey, this story, was about more than just one moment in time. It was about the ripple effect, the way one action, one choice could change the course of lives. His life, Jake's life, and even his mother's. The phone buzzed again. This time it was Jake. "I spoke to my mom. She's upset, but she's trying to understand. Thank you for everything, Keanu. I think I'm finally ready to start facing it all." Keanu sat back, feeling a rare sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just about one confrontation, one apology. It was about growth. And, in the end, it was all worth it. As the weeks went by, Keanu couldn't help but feel that something had fundamentally shifted inside of him. The moment he had stood up for his mother in that restaurant, the chain of events that followed had opened a door he hadn't fully anticipated, one that not only helped Jake, but also helped him come to terms with his own role in the world around him. Life had a strange way of teaching lessons when you least expected them, and Keanu was beginning to understand the profound impact his small act of standing up for someone had created. Jake was slowly finding his way back, not just as an employee at the restaurant, but as a person. The young man who had been so quick to lash out was now showing signs of genuine change. Keanu couldn't stop thinking about how their paths had crossed in that fateful moment at the restaurant, and how a simple, seemingly insignificant event had triggered a ripple effect. This experience wasn't just about Jake learning to handle his anger. It was about Keanu learning to listen more, to see the people around him in a deeper way. He realized that life wasn't always about reacting. Sometimes it was about stepping back and offering understanding. One evening, as Keanu was scrolling through his phone in his quiet apartment, his thoughts were interrupted by a text from Jake. "Keanu, I wanted to thank you again for everything. I know it's been a while since we spoke, but I've made some big decisions. I'm leaving the restaurant and starting a new chapter. My mum and I have started seeing a therapist together. I never would have had the courage to do this without your help." Keanu's heart swelled as he read the message. It was a small victory, but it meant the world to him. Jake was finally taking the necessary steps to rebuild his life, and most importantly, he wasn't doing it alone anymore. Keanu replied, feeling the weight of the words as he typed, "You've done all the hard work, Jake. You're the one who made the decision to change. I'm proud of you, and I'm glad I could be there to help." The truth was, Keanu didn't fully understand how deep the change had gone for Jake. He had always been the type of person who kept his emotions close to his chest, focusing on his work and distancing himself from the complexities of others' lives. But now he could see how his actions had impacted someone else in a profound way. Jake was learning how to forgive, how to trust, and most importantly, how to heal. And in doing so, he had helped Keanu heal too. A few days later, Keanu was at a dinner with his mother when the topic of the restaurant incident came up again. It was a rare moment of reflection, something Keanu hadn't expected, especially after everything that had happened. "I spoke to Jake's mom the other day," Patricia said quietly, her voice tinged with the wisdom that came with age. "She wanted to thank me for you standing up for her son. She said you gave him the courage to confront his demons." Keanu was taken aback. "I didn't expect that." "Well, people don't always show their gratitude in the way you expect, but you made a real difference in his life, and in your own." Keanu leaned back, absorbing the weight of her words. His mother was right. What had started as a simple act of protection had turned into something much deeper, something far more significant. He had given Jake the chance to change, but in doing so, he had also found a new sense of purpose and connection in his own life. Later that night, as Keanu lay in bed, he thought about everything that had transpired over the past few months. The incident at the restaurant, Jake's revelation about his father, the reconciliation between mother and son, it was all connected in a way he hadn't fully realized until now. Life had a funny way of revealing truths, of making people realize what they were truly capable of, and as the months passed, Keanu continued to reflect on the role he played in this story. He had learned to listen, to understand, and to empathize. But most importantly, he had learned to give others the space to grow. It wasn't always about fixing problems, but about being there for the people who needed him, whether they realized it or not. One day, a few weeks after Jake left the restaurant, Keanu received another message. This time it was from Patricia. "Keanu, I just wanted to share something with you. I've been thinking a lot lately, and I think I've learned a lot from everything that's happened. It's not just about standing up for people, but about giving them the opportunity to change and grow, and I want to thank you for showing me that." Keanu smiled to himself as he read the message. His mother had always been a strong woman, but now he saw her in a new light, someone who was capable of growth too. This journey wasn't just about him or Jake, it was about everyone involved, finding the courage to change and become better versions of themselves. The next day, Keanu met up with Jake, who had arranged to meet at a small cafe in the city. When Keanu arrived, Jake was already sitting at a table, a slight smile on his face. "Keanu," Jake said as Keanu sat down, "I've been thinking a lot about everything. I've got a new job lined up, and I've been going to therapy. It's been hard, but I know I'm on the right track." Keanu looked at him with a nod of approval. "I'm proud of you, Jake, really." Jake shrugged, a humble smile creeping onto his face. "I couldn't have done it without your help. I didn't think I'd ever make it this far." Keanu smiled back. "You did the work. You made the change. I'm just glad I was there to see it." They sat in silence for a moment, just appreciating the peacefulness of the cafe. The weight of the past months had lifted, replaced by a sense of hope and possibility. It was then that Keanu realized how much he had changed too. The person he was before the confrontation at the restaurant, before learning about Jake's struggles, wasn't the same person he was now. He had learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to fight, but to give someone the space to heal, to offer them the tools to find their own way. The lesson was clear. Change didn't happen overnight, but with the right support, the right mindset, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths, it was possible. Keanu's life had settled into a new rhythm. The experiences of the past months, the restaurant incident, Jake's transformation, and the deepening of his own personal growth had reshaped him in ways he hadn't expected. Every day he felt more connected to the people around him, especially his mother, who had become a source of support and strength in ways that still took him by surprise. But just when things seemed calm, the past had a way of reminding him that it was never fully behind. Keanu hadn't seen Jake in over a month, And while their brief interactions had left him feeling hopeful, there was a nagging feeling in the back of his mind. It wasn't just about Jake's struggles anymore. It was about confronting the things he had been avoiding in his own life. And now it seemed the moment had come. One Friday afternoon, as Keanu was finishing up a photo shoot, he received a call from his mother. There was an urgency in her voice that immediately grabbed his attention. "Keanu, I need you to come over." "It's about Jake," she said. Her words clipped as if she was trying to hold herself together. "Something's happened." Keanu's heart skipped a beat. "What's going on? Is he okay?" "I think you need to come here," she said. "I'll explain when you get here." His stomach churned as he quickly excused himself from the shoot, throwing on his jacket as he rushed out of the studio. The drive felt endless, his mind racing with all kinds of possibilities. Had something happened to Jake? Had he fallen back into old habits? Or worse, was there something even darker lurking in his past that Keanu hadn't fully understood? Soon as he arrived at his mother's house, he rushed inside, where his mother was pacing in the living room. Her face was pale, a look of deep concern etched into her features. "What's happened, Mom?" Keanu asked, his voice tight. She motioned for him to sit. "Jake's in trouble. He came over earlier today and he was different. There was something in his eyes. I don't think he's okay." Keanu's breath caught in his throat. "What do you mean?" Patricia sat down beside him, her hands shaking slightly. "He admitted something today that he's been hiding for a long time. Something about his father and what happened to him before he went to prison. I don't know all the details, but it's clear that Jake's been carrying a heavy burden. He's struggling more than he's letting on." Keanu leaned forward, his worry intensifying. "What exactly did he say?" Patricia swallowed hard. "He didn't go into all the details, but he said that the reason he's been so angry all these years, why he's been so reckless, is because he never dealt with his father's actions. He felt abandoned, betrayed. He wanted to believe that it wasn't true, that his father wasn't the monster everyone said he was. But now, he's come to terms with it, and it's tearing him apart." Keanu's mind spun. He thought back to the early days when he first encountered Jake, the young, angry man who had lashed out at him for no reason. Everything was starting to make sense now. But this was more than just Jake being angry or confused. This was about a young man facing the harsh reality of his past and feeling like it was too much to carry. Keanu stood up abruptly, running his hand through his hair. "I need to see him?" Patricia nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "I think you're the only one who can reach him now." Keanu didn't hesitate. He left his mother's house in a hurry, heading straight to Jake's apartment. He had no idea what he was going to say, but he knew this was his final test, his chance to make a real difference in Jake's life. When he arrived, Jake was sitting on the steps outside, his head bowed, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. He didn't look up when Keanu approached, but Keanu could see the weight of the world in his posture. "Jake," Keanu called softly, taking a seat next to him. "I'm here, let's talk." Jake's eyes were bloodshot, the remnants of tears still visible on his face. "I don't know where to start," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Start wherever you need to," Keanu said, his tone gentle. "But you don't have to do this alone." Jake finally looked up, his eyes filled with the rawness of someone who had reached their breaking point. "I don't know who I am anymore, Keanu. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with all this anger, all this pain. I've been running from it for so long, pretending like it didn't matter, but it does. And now it's all catching up to me." Keanu didn't know what to say at first. He couldn't fix Jake's pain, couldn't undo the years of hurt that had shaped him, but he could be there. And sometimes that was all a person really needed. "I know it feels impossible right now," Keanu said, his voice steady. "But I promise you, this is just the beginning of your journey. You've taken the first step, you've acknowledged what's been weighing on you. That's the hardest part." Jake wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I've been so angry at my dad for what he did, and for the things I thought he left me with. I didn't want to accept that he was capable of hurting people, but now I see it, and it's like I'm just as broken as he was." Keanu shook his head. "You're not broken, Jake. You're not your father. What he did to you, what he did to others, it's not your fault, and it doesn't define who you are." You've got the chance now to be someone different, a better version of yourself. And that starts right now, right here. Jake's eyes searched Keanu's face, looking for something he couldn't quite explain. You really think I can change? Keanu gave him a small, reassuring smile. I don't think it's about change, Jake. It's about growth. You've already started, and I'm here every step of the way. For the first time in what felt like forever, Jake gave a small nod. Okay, I'll try. Keanu didn't have all the answers, but he knew that this moment was everything. The road ahead would be long and uncertain, but Jake had taken the first step toward healing, and so had Keanu. As they sat in silence, Keanu realized that this wasn't just about one person overcoming their past. It was about both of them facing their demons together, and in that shared vulnerability, they were both learning to let go of what had held them back for so long. It had been a few months since the conversation with Jake on the steps outside his apartment. Keanu often found himself thinking back to that day, to the weight of Jake's words, the vulnerability he showed, and the fragile hope that seemed to flicker in his eyes when he decided to take that first step toward healing. That moment, that decision, felt like a turning point, not just for Jake, but for Keanu as well. Life had a strange way of moving forward, whether you were ready for it or not. Keanu's career continued to flourish, his work on movies and commercials keeping him constantly busy. But with each passing day, he found himself more focused on the people in his life, especially his mother, who was always there to offer her wisdom, and Jake, who, despite his setbacks, was slowly building the life he deserved. It wasn't easy for Jake. The anger didn't just disappear. The trauma wasn't gone overnight. But Keanu had seen him fight for change. He had seen Jake go to therapy, rebuild relationships, and start to confront the hurt of his past. Slowly but surely, the pieces were falling into place. One Sunday afternoon, Keanu received an unexpected call. It was from Jake, and for the first time in months, the tone of his voice was light, filled with an unfamiliar sense of excitement. Keanu, guess what? I did it. I finally got the job I've been wanting. Jake's voice crackled through the phone, the joy unmistakable. It's not a perfect situation, but I'm finally doing something that matters to me. Keanu's heart swelled with pride. That's amazing, Jake. I knew you could do it. I still have a lot to work through, but I finally feel like I'm on the right path, Jake continued. I just wanted to thank you, man, for everything. You don't know how much it means to me that you didn't give up on me. Keanu felt a lump form in his throat. I never would. I'm proud of you. You've done the hard work and now you're seeing the rewards. Jake paused for a moment, then added, and I'm going to see my mom tomorrow. I think we're going to start working on our relationship again. It feels good to finally face that. Keanu smiled, knowing how much that moment meant for Jake. That's great. Take it one step at a time, and remember, you don't have to do it alone. The conversation ended with a promise to meet up soon. Keanu hung up the phone, his mind filled with pride and gratitude for how far Jake had come. But there was still one last thing Keanu needed to do, to tie up the loose ends in his own life. That night, as he sat down for dinner with his mother, Keanu realized how much his relationship with her had grown over the past few months. The distance that had once existed between them, the unspoken things they hadn't addressed, seemed to be a thing of the past. They were no longer two people sharing a house. They were family, in the truest sense, understanding each other in ways they hadn't before. I've been thinking about a lot of things, Mom, Keanu said, his voice thoughtful. About the way I've been living, about how I've let the past shape me without really dealing with it. Patricia set her fork down, looking at him with the same intensity she always had. I've seen you change, Keanu. And I've seen you start to deal with things you didn't want to face. You've come a long way. I'm proud of you. Keanu smiled, the words filling him with warmth. I think we both have. I never realized how much I've been avoiding things until now, but I'm ready to face them. And I'm ready to move forward. Patricia nodded, her eyes softening. You've always had it in you, Keanu, but sometimes it takes someone, to help us see the way. For me, it was your father's illness. For you, it's been these past few months, with Jake and everything. That's happened. Life isn't always easy, but we learn from it, we grow. Keanu reached across the table, taking her hand. "You're right, Mom, and I don't think I could have gotten through any of this without you." She squeezed his hand gently. "We're in this together." The next morning, Keanu woke up early to take a walk. The sun was just rising, casting a golden glow over the city. As he walked, his thoughts drifted to everything that had happened, the tension in the restaurant that had started it all, the unexpected connection with Jake, the emotional journey they had both undergone, and the lessons learned along the way. Keanu had always been someone who tried to control everything around him, but now he understood that there were some things that couldn't be controlled, only accepted and worked through. Relationships, personal struggles, and the weight of the past were all things that could either bind you or free you, depending on how you chose to handle them. And Keanu had chosen to free himself, not just from the past, but from the need to always be perfect, to always have the answers. He realized that true strength wasn't about never making mistakes. It was about learning from them, about picking yourself up and moving forward with a new perspective. As Keanu walked through the quiet streets, he saw a group of kids playing soccer in a nearby park. Their laughter rang through the air, bright and full of hope. It was a simple scene, but it reminded him of the possibilities that lay ahead. Life wasn't about avoiding the challenges or running from the past. It was about embracing what came. Next, a message pinged on his phone. It was from Jake. "Hey, Keanu, I wanted to tell you something important. My mom and I had a real conversation today. We're starting fresh. It's not going to be easy, but we're both willing to try. Thank you for everything. You're a part of this too." Keanu smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. In helping Jake, he had helped himself. In giving someone else the chance to heal, he had discovered the strength to heal himself as well. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?